It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin, and we're back.
And we are back. You know, we've been going down a retail road lately, haven't we? I'm thinking about this as we're speaking, and this conversation I think originated when we did our episode on Bridgehampton Commons, the 50th anniversary.
Yes.
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking today about Riverhead, the Tanger Mall, and Riverhead proper. We're sort of getting out of our technically the South Fork. We want to be equal opportunity on our Hamptons. We went to Southampton recently because we knew we skewed East Hampton. So now we're going completely in another direction. But Esperanza, suffice to say, Riverhead is an integral part of, the South Fork community, basically for the shopping.
Yeah, I guess that always has been the case. I mean, at least for automobile shopping anyway, in my history.
Exactly. Esperanza brought this up before. We always have our little brief dialogue before we start to record. And Esperanza was mentioning how, in the early days and really even to present day, I guess if you're living on the South Fork, it's easy to get your Jaguar serviced or your Tesla serviced, soon to be coming, or your Mercedes or Porsche. But, if you have a Nissan or a Toyota or a Mazda like I'm driving, I have to go to Riverhead.
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess it was always there.
Whoop-de-doo in your Subaru if you have one of those too.
That's also in Riverhead.
Exactly.
Not that you mentioned it. Not to mention, and of course we spoke about this in a past episode. I know they have a Costco because I've spent many a day there.
BJ's, Costco,
and a BJ's and a Walmart. I mean, so they've sort of embraced it, but I guess this story almost has to start, and we're going to go down a bunch of different lanes here because that's what we do on our Hamptons. But I guess it really started, and we're culling a lot of this information with the advent of really, I'm going to go on record and say this is probably the biggest mall of its kind on Long Island. I got to believe it surpasses the others, which is the Tanger Outlet Mall. This was circa 1994. And I guess we really have to mention, and this is something we were talking about just before, the Suffolk County Seat is still technically in Riverhead. That's still the county seat.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, my impression was that had changed somehow because really the buzz of activity is up island, right?
Yeah. Well, to your point.
Except for the courts or filing your,
Right. This is still technically the county seat, but because the vast majority of the county offices are now in Hauppague, okay, we know we really have two East End Suffolk County legislators here, and the rest are all from Up Island. So yeah, I'm sure Hauppague is technically more convenient for the brunt of them, but metaphorically, Esperanza, it's also another way the East End gets short shrift.
True. I mean, it's interesting that just thinking about this, why they wouldn't have just made it official and said, okay, now Hauppague is the county seat. Why does River, at least that's the case in name alone. Now.
The funny thing was, I just assumed that that's what they did, but not in name. So it's still technically here. Maybe they threw us, hey, get a load of this. I'm referring to Riverhead as us because it's the greater East End, right?
Yeah.
So they threw us a bone and they said we're still the county seat. As Bridget Fleming and I forgot the other gentleman from the North Fork, Al, it'll come to me, are driving 60 miles to go to Hauppague every day or every other day when they're doing it. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But so this story in the New York Times is really interesting. It started with Bill Talmadge, and we were talking about this. We don't know if this is a Talmadge from the Talmadges of the South Fork, probably a relation. But he was flying his antique plane, and he looked down over Riverhead and noticed two complete clover leaves touching each other. And he was talking about how it looked like they were planning for a World's Fair, thinking about the traffic they could generate from a major center like a factory outlet mall. Esperanza, there is one up somewhat upstate, the Woodbury Common. I don't know if you've ever been to that one. Not Woodbury, Long Island. Woodbury, it's I think Orange County.
No, I've not. I'm not
That
familiar.
that was if it's not a Tanger, it was an outlet mall. That was like the first of its kind. And again, while we sound like a retail shopping show, sometimes we're not. But this was like a store of factory outlets, off price, whatever. But anyway,
yeah, back when like the only outlet shopping that you could do was in Amagansett Square.
exactly right, which was another brouhaha, if you recall, because of the fear of tour buses invading Amagansett to go there. But that little tiny
square.
Yeah, they're coming from the Bronx to go there, you know. But anyway, Riverhead agreed. And now this was interesting. So Riverhead decided to allow certain parts of this industrially zoned area. And look, we're not going to claim to be real Riverhead experts. We're not.
No, not at all. Yeah.
We've been there.
I mean, to me, it was more farm fields than anything else, you know, and like Polish Town and that kind of thing. And the Star Confectionery right downtown.
and Polish Town, I do believe still exists.
Oh yeah, I know.
In a smaller form, perhaps.
Yeah.
But so Stephen Tanger, the executive vice president of the Tanger Outlets, operating, now this is 94, 24 outlet centers in 20 states, went public around this time. This guy was generating $21+ million in revenue. But whatever. Now, just to segue back, Riverhead officials, to protect merchants, prohibited the restaurants around the center to sort of make the travelers who were going to these outlets go into town to eat.
Yeah, which that's not really true.
I can't imagine that it was.
No, I mean, I think ever since this development, and I mean, by the way, I wasn't really living here. I wasn't on Long Island at the time when this was all happening. I mean, I kind of came back and like, surprise, look, you know,
right.
It's like, oh, you want to go to Tanger Mall? Oh, what is that? You know, I had no idea. But I think after this, it became that county road that became just like the strip mall lined with Fridays and Burger King and whatever else, right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is really between Esperanza and I right now. We're not exactly sure, but I think what Esperanza just brought out is sort of what happened. I think this was the catalyst for a lot of what came after.
Yeah.
In
my memory, it was just, you know, as I mentioned to you, we were talking earlier, my memory was just a sprinkling of car dealerships along that road. And that was it.
Right. Exactly. Now, so Stephen Tanger was looking for a site specifically on Long Island. We wanted to be on the LIA, the backbone of Long Island. And there are over, remember, this is 1994. There were over 5 million people within a 45-minute drive of this shopping center. And to be fair, this kind of shopping center is a true destination, the kind of place.
Yeah, you know, you drive an hour to get.
You're not driving an hour to go to Bridgehampton Commons. I mean, or an hour and a half. But this is, I mean, people would spend a day here or half day, like big.
It is definitely an outdoor mall.
Exactly correct. And so they opened on 4th of July weekend. And, you know, again, these were outlets: Liz Claiborne, Bass, Jeffrey Bean, Jones, New York, Cape Island Knitters, you know, all major brands in its day. The center was scheduled to be completed in 96, and it was going to be Tanger's largest center, 300,000 square feet, 90 stores.
Wow.
And then, I mean, like crazy. London Fog, Oshkosh, Bigosh. My kids used to wear that. I'm sure yours did also, right?
I used to wear that.
And that's probably true also. And,
what do you mean used to? Wait a minute.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if they make our size anymore, Esperanza, but that would be pretty cool if they did. But now, and here's something even more incredible. And I've actually seen, you probably have also, like overhead shots of this complex. I mean, it's a city. That's really what it looks like.
Incredible.
Tanger 2 in 99 added on top of the 300,000 square feet, another 431,000 square feet. So they were like at 729,000 square feet total. And this is when outlet centers, remember, Amazon was around. They started in 94 as a bookseller, but it really wasn't until 99, 2000 that they became the internet department store.
The
So
go-to shopping.
right,
Yeah. One-stop shop. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but we are going to take you on this little trip. And this New York Times article was really sweet talking about this. They were talking about how some of these people were going out. You know, the Saturday, the parking lot was almost full. Day trippers and weekenders on their way to the East End to shop. And they were diehard outlet shoppers. I like this Agnes Adams Manzo of Shoreham. So that's just to the west. This is not a big drive for her, but it's got a lot of promise. It's a wonderful thing for Riverhead's economic development. It might help everybody. Listen to this one. Long Island won't be thought of as just a summer place. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
and it's not, okay. That's not entirely untrue.
Exactly. I mean, a Beatrice Stump of Hicksville from Greenport. That's it for Pennsylvania. Apparently, she went to outlet malls in Pennsylvania. Long Island now has something like this. And so it just tells how Etignan-on-Yare, 52 stores affiliated with Tanger in states as far away as Oklahoma and Arizona. We're very careful to who we go in with. They're co-tenants and they have really familiar names. Again, Maidenform, London Fog. The Battaglios of Valley Stream were visiting the center. People from Brooklyn Heights were driving out here. The discounts were offset by sales tax. They're trying to listen to this. All right, our Hamptons audience. This is not Esperanza and I talking right now.
I'm just laughing at all of this in a way.
Yeah. Gene Adams of Brooklyn Heights. They're trying to build up Riverhead. It used to be a dump. Now it's getting better. Okay. But I didn't say
so sad.
That.
Used to be when Miss Adams.
This is 1999 we're talking
Clearly she wasn't, familiar with the history of Riverhead.
Right, exactly.
As the county seat.
As the county seat. And it tells us they're just very anecdotal.
But I do agree. There was a time.
There was a time. And the Solomons of Queens were on their way to Sag Harbor. Mr. Solomon was in the women's wear business. It's still cheaper than going to department stores, and I sell quality merchandise. I'm happy to see quality merchandise here. Okay. Now, here's an interesting, illuminating statement from Mrs. Solomon. I just want to know what they'll do in the winter, and I quote, when no one comes to the Hamptons. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how true that was even I was coming every weekend in 1999.
I mean, I have to say that if it were up to just me, the Tanger Mall would be empty. I mean, if I were the only shopper.
Yeah, I
think I've been there in like 3 years.
We're not the biggest. We were never one of those big outlets.
I do not travel for discounts.
Yeah, I'm not that. Yeah, I mean, besides, especially I could go to Walmart.com and get it at my door the next day if I want something.
Well,
cheap.
That's true. But this was back before.
Right. And exactly. True. And it was back in the day. It was a different animal. But, getting back to the political aspect of it.
Yeah, and economic, right?
I mean, economic. Now, Riverhead expects to benefit from the center. And in the first 3 years, Mr. Tanger said the center will add $88 million to the economy in jobs and in taxes. And a council member at the time, Victor Prusanowski, I'm going to assume this is a town councilman, town of Riverhead, said he expected the center to generate $800 to $1 million in property taxes and $100 million in sales taxes. I mean, that's not chump change.
Right.
I mean, my goodness. But it does get into a bigger question, and we'll be going down that road shortly.
Yes.
She knows Esperanza knows where we're going.
I'm trying not to get ahead of myself.
Exactly. I could see she's.
You could see the smoke coming out of my ears.
The smoke is coming out of hers. We're going to
the
get
wheels
to it
are
soon.
turning.
We are going to get to it we are going to get to it very soon. So, but now Mr. Prusanowski said if Riverhead would face a tax increase of 25 to 30%, and the school district alone will lose $800,000 from that payment. This is like our Indian reservation casino. I guess they said Indian at that time at that era.
Mm.
Ultimately, there will be 500 to 600 people employed full time. But here, Esperanza, Leon is the place you want to go. I know it. And this is exactly the point Esperanza was making. She touched on it briefly about the farmland and all else. Others were not so sure the center is a good idea. Martin Cantor, a consultant and former Suffolk Economic Development Commissioner, quote, I think it's going to cause some problems for the merchants in downtown Riverhead. I am never in favor of putting together glitzy, low-price factory outlet into a town. No amount of trolley cars can bring people back to the downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, Esperanza, you were touching on the farmland, like your recollections of Riverhead. You mentioned to me when you were even bringing your car to service.
Yes,
your
I
Nissan.
went. I have to tell you, I even took the bus one time from East Hampton to Riverhead because I had no vehicle. Right.
Okay.
It was painful, to say the least. But that's when I really appreciated all this. These vistas.
But you were bringing up when we were talking about this, how you saw these vistas, and you would go down a side street that all of a sudden you'd be looking at just
at a farm field. Yeah.
At a farm field.
Yeah.
At a farm field. And this is something, it's interesting. Sometimes Esperanza and I did a little brainstorm before an episode. This really isn't even part of the outline, but Esperanza brought it up, and I think she made such a great point. The development of Tanger, in addition to the big box stores, again, we went over this. In addition to every car dealer under the sun, there's Walmart, there's Applebee's, there's
Target.
I mean, there's just Target. There's everything there. And it also led to a lot of housing developments. We'll touch on this as we go along, but Esperanza made a point, and I didn't really think of it until she brought it up. This place, I'm going to put it to you in a question almost, Esperanza. It's sort of suburban sprawl, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's what it became. And I don't want to sound judgmental about that, right? But it just, when you get a taste for what the downtown of Riverhead was and is, the old houses, sort of Victorian houses and things like that, like normal, quote unquote, normal growth would see you, subdividing land and kind of providing for tracks that would, allow for more construction of those homes and things like that. But this became more the communities, like not gated communities, but communities of townhouses and communities of the, and I find that to be very suburban.
I do.
I'm all for that kind of housing, to fill the need for housing. I understand, but it's not exactly pretty to me.
And it
doesn't gather around a normal downtown center that you don't need a car for, like it just
exactly. And that's sort of where we're going. I mean, almost like
it's
like a juxtaposition between what Riverhead does have a downtown. There is a downtown. Yet this, and look, this kind of thing has happened. You've read about this all over the country. A Walmart comes into a small community and just wipes out a downtown.
Decimates the downtown.
Right. So, I mean, this is Walmart squared.
Right. And not to say that the downtown of Riverhead wasn't depressed, like it was at this time when this was built. I know that. I mean, I'm aware of that. Greenport was the same, but imagine had Greenport or Southold allowed for something like this to be built near them, then you wouldn't have this recovery of the downtown of Greenport, which has been really a good recovery.
That place looks, it's got sort of almost like it's like a hipster vibe. So, but it really is true. And I think when you were talking about a lot of the developments, like my perception of some of the developments there, and I think very, very much up island suburban-y subdivision type development. Which, and look, that's happened.
Cookie cutter houses.
And that's happened in certain parts of, the South Fork as well. I mean, that does exist, but I mean, just there, It happened, I think, a little more. And again, maybe part of it was this development was bringing in some jobs. I mean, it was more, it's not inexpensive now to live in Riverhead. I mean, the prices have gone higher, but back in the day, there were bargains to be had in Riverhead, especially when this outlet mall was being built. But, continuing on with what Martin Cantor was saying, he also faulted a center in Bellport. There is a Bellport outlet center that hurt retailers in Patchogue, which also had a downtown district. That's gentrified a little more, I believe.
More recently has recovered. Yeah.
Wow. This
is very artsy, right? Yeah. Very artsy, very forward thinking. Actually, I think Patchogue has been.
They've really have encouraged. Hey, Esperanza, we are really going outside the comfort zone.
We really are. I mean, we're going way beyond.
Yeah. I mean, what next? New Hope, Pennsylvania? I mean, where are we?
This is our final frontier.
Exactly. That's so true. But so Mr. Cantor was saying, and he said, Riverhead has a weak downtown, and it's bypassed by travelers to the Hamptons or the North Fork. And again, to Esperanza's point, there is, and we'll get into present day as we get towards the end of this episode, but there is a downtown there. There are downtown stores, and we'll talk about the Suffolk Theater, the aquarium, which is right in the downtown district. But Mr. Cantor continues, and this is a guy, again, with, former Suffolk County Economic Development Commissioner. He's a consultant to this kind of, this is sort of his lane. Riverhead, splish splash. It's bringing in families, but has it helped the downtown?
No, people go to Splish Splash and they leave.
Right. Exactly right.
People go to the outlets and they may stop for a bite at whatever is there now, Panera or Fridays or whatever it is.
Yes.
And they leave. But they're not going to the Star Confectionery. I can't say that
which has been there since God knows when. And it's
because that's the best little place.
That's right. And because to your point, and that's the big question, they're not really going into the downtown.
Yeah.
And that's, and again, continuing this, and I remember this name, Dr. Pearl Kamer, who was the senior economist of the Long Island Regional Planning Board at the time. Again, remember this, we're talking now late 90s, 2000. This is when we're talking. The possible effects on the once rural North Fork have also come under discussion. So not just what are the ramifications to the South Fork, but the North Fork. It's difficult to conceive that one shopping center will change the character, according to Dr. Kamer. And in its long-term economic plan, the board suggested, listen to this, that additional outlet centers be built, particularly in tourist areas like Eastern Long Island.
Oh, yay, bring them on, yay.
Yeah. I mean, this was a conversation we had with Bridgehampton Commons. Was that going to be the floodgates to strip centers on every corner?
Well, yeah, I would say no to necessarily that happening. And I think that the towns have been very good about not allowing that. But it's like the whole thing, like the Field of Dreams.
Right.
If you build it, they will come. The more of this type of thing that you build, the more people will come, and they're not coming for the reasons you really want them to come for.
That's exactly correct. And again, we're not going to delve too deep in here, but just to give you an idea of what was going on during this era, big Long Island developer Wilbur Breslin was planning a 1.6 million square foot shopping center in Hauppague with 6 anchor stores, and ultimately it only developed into 400,000 square feet with a Walmart, not the mini city he planned. So again, I guess the point is this kind of thing triggered additional activity.
Yeah.
Regionally, so to speak. Hauppague is not that far from Riverhead. And again, these are those big questions. Did the Riverhead Center are they attracting Long Island residents or tourists? It's difficult. They really weren't sure. And again, to your point that we just touched on, are the shoppers going to eat in Riverhead? At the time, described as, and this is the New York Times, a small town with shabby areas and few restaurants. Until we investigated Mr. Tanger, we were somewhat skeptical of the idea of having an outlet center downtown, said Andrew Ricard, at the time the president of the Riverhead Merchants Association. It frightened them. Justifiably, Esperanza. I mean, it would frighten me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, the downtown merchants were hoping that a jitney, and this is Mr. Cantor made that point, a jitney would draw customers from the outlets to the business district, but they were worried the drivers were going to bypass Main Street.
And they have to. I mean, you can't have
No,
all that traffic flowing through, those wonderful roundabouts.
right. I mean, for sure. And they interviewed the president of the Riverhead BID acronym for Business Improvement District, Barry Barth. We look at the Tanger Market outlet as an opportunity to bring people to Riverhead. So,
if anything, I think that the aquarium has done that much more than Tanger, and that's where I say, like, revive the downtown. This isn't downtown Tanger outlet. It's not downtown.
No.
Why are they calling this downtown?
It is in no way.
They just created a destination, like you said.
It is in no way, shape, or form. This would be, to give a South Fork analogy, Esperanza, I would say, like, this would be the equivalent of putting this in the northern reaches of the Northwest Woods or Springs and saying it's going to help East Hampton Village.
Right.
Like it's just, I don't see it.
Right. And what we touched on earlier, I mean, the fact that she thought it wasn't going to change the rural character, Miss
Right.
Kamer,
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that's not the case.
No,
of course, it's going to affect it.
And
I get it. I guess not everybody can be a farmer, but I just,
right.
I have to wonder. I also, I saw, I think she added that it is a good match for the assets of the East End. It will also enforce tourist traffic to the vineyards. And I wonder, what about the vineyards? Like, has that has that happened?
That's a really great point. I mean, I almost would think that it would, because it's really just a dead ride east. I guess
I'm not a tourist, so
no,
I don't know how that mind works.
Right, but it's a great point. I hadn't even. Esperanza, you're killing it. My God. She's
I'm on fire.
He's on fire. But I would think there might be, and we don't know this. I mean, if they promoted the vineyards at Tanger, but
no, they don't.
I guess the point, Esperanza, would be like, if we're calling this like a tourist destination, I would think the point is here, really the big point. I would say that going to the vineyards from Tanger Mall would be a bigger avenue than going to downtown Riverhead.
Exactly. That's I guess that's my point, is if anything, it would maybe benefit the vineyards.
And it's a great point. And interestingly, within this article, and there were certainly vineyards in the late 90s. I don't see a thing about it. But we are going to move a little bit forward in a minute. And just to touch on this, Mr. Talmadge, now this is the original guy that flew over this all those years, a couple of years ago.
The real estate consultant.
And he actually started running that little jitney, not to be confused with the Hampton jitney, more like a streetcar.
No, like a trolley, like
a trolley,
North Fork trolley or something like that. Yeah.
He hoped to start the service by April, but they apparently didn't reach an accord. And I don't believe it ever really happened. I mean, they had the Suffolk County executive at the time. They approved of a jitney, but it wouldn't run like what we wouldn't like is if they would run on normal bus lines. I don't know what the ultimate end up is. Mr. Cantor came back into play. How many trolleys do they need to get 80,000 people to Riverhead? Tanger is not a mile away. It's a few miles away. And again, he keeps saying, I do not think they're going to see the type of people they expect.
No. And I think ultimately all they've had is just more traffic, which they've had to, deviate from the downtown.
All of those roundabouts.
Exactly. Lots of congestion is what I find in Riverhead.
Yeah. And Mr. Prosanowski, this is the member of the Riverhead Town Board at the time, Riverhead has never been known as a big tourist town. We're reorganizing. And here's his quote. Within 2 or 3 years, we're going to be the place to be on the East End. We have a lot of exciting things going on.
I think they have revitalized the waterfront, right? the aquarium has done, like I said, it's done a lot
They
in
have.
that regard. And so I actually think, but it's taken a lot more than 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. The theater that you touched
The
on,
Suffolk Theater. I mean,
Suffolk Theater.
have you ever done that little river walk in Riverhead?
I haven't. I've
Okay.
wanted to, but
I
haven't.
did that. I did that on one of my sojourns to Costco, actually. I said, I'm going to do a Riverhead triple header. I'm going to do Costco. I'm going to do the river walk. And I went to the Suffolk County Historical Museum, which was a really
Well,
nice
good
day.
for you.
Yeah,
That's a full day.
That was a fun. Well, when you're going from
Now, did
Springs,
you go to
when you're going from,
Costco last because your
yes,
frozen goods would have been melting?
an excellent detective work and deduction, and as
Well,
usual,
just good planning.
as usual, she is so spot on. But that's exactly true, Esperanza. That's exactly how I did it. But I guess we're gonna go into, we're gonna just touch on, before we get into a little bit more present day, which I'm warning you now, ladies and gentlemen of our Hamptons audience, will probably be a little bit freeform, but we're looking at 97 now. There's more development going on. This is the point Esperanza made in the beginning of this podcast, how Tanger really sort of opened the door.
The floodgates, yeah.
The Riverhead Center came into play, 431,000 square feet. So now that's 431,000 square feet on top of the 700 plus thousand. So you're at well over 1.1 million square feet between those two centers. And then, along with the large discount stores known in this category, the trade as category killers, they had Home Depot, 132,000 square feet, Circuit City, 20,000, Staples, 24. Modell's no longer there, obviously. Party City, 56,000 square foot. Wallbaum's, a multiplex theater.
They paved paradise
and put up
a parking lot.
Exactly. And it was how now this is Marshall's was a potential tenant. Barnes and Noble, I know there's a Barnes and Noble there. And we spoke about
to be at
Bridgehampton Commons. That's right. And all of these things were also underway with, and Esperanza made this point, with additional restaurants. You want a chain restaurant, Panera? You want Applebee's? They're all there.
All chains. That's the thing. None of this. They're franchises, maybe. Okay, right. I get it. So there could be local owners, but none of it is any sort of mom and pop kind of thing.
No, it is. This is not downtown. This is like on, there, I guess it's Route 25. And correct. It has no downtown feel at all. I've been on County Road, Route 25 in Riverhead. I know Esperanza has.
It feels 58. Yeah.
Right. It feels far more. And this is just a statement. This is just my opinion. It feels very similar to being on Hempstead Turnpike up Island, Old Country Road, Jericho Turnpike.
There's nothing country about Old Country Road.
There's nothing country about. Oh my goodness! If we were our Nassau County, we could talk about how that's been carved up and but that's a whole other conversation.
This is just falling in line with that. Yeah.
Right. But the point of it is, this is just and this is the point Esperanza was alluding to earlier in this episode. It feels. And the same cannot be said the further east you go on the North Fork. I mean, I think places like Southall, especially when you get out East Marion, Orient, that really feels rural. I mean, absolutely rural. So I don't think there's any doubt about this, but Riverhead really does feel.
Yeah, it's interesting because you get steps outside of, just, I guess it would be north of this area where this commercial area is, and you do find like lovely residential, even still farm fields. I think it's just not far outside of this, which is such a sort of
and the closer it really is. And like the closer you get to Long Island Sound, when there are just really modest, bucolic ranches, very simple living, the kind of houses, these kind of Esperanza, you ride by and you see boogie boards leaning up against the house.
Right.
Yeah. Not McMansioned, maybe a couple, but not to the extent on the South Fork. So that stuff does exist. Now, we touched on the Suffolk Theater. That was purchased as an Art Deco movie palace. It was purchased by the town in 94 to revitalize that downtown. They've done some good things there. They've had live shows. There's live music, and so that has happened.
Yeah, no, I think there has been a good amount of revitalization of the downtown. Yeah.
And the developers of Riverhead Center were also building rental houses. And we're going to start to wrap up because we're really coming to the end. But they developed on a 50-acre parcel on Osborne Avenue, a rental complex called Riverhead Landing. I believe it's there. But I guess in summation, while we have the Riverwalk, and that's terrific, and the aquarium, that's terrific, Esperanza, hard to say this question is really subjective, but Tanger Mall vis-a-vis Riverhead downtown, plus or minus.
Yeah, Riverhead in general. How did it benefit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the downtown, I think, looks better than it did before Tanger got there. I mean, I think it looks, I think what they've done with government funds, the Riverwalk is fantastic, really beautiful.
But could that have happened? Could it have happened without, without like with some vision and with some good, proper planning and without
an
outlet mall? It's a what if, right?
It's a what if. It's, reminiscent of, when we did our episode on the bypass, should we have good that we did or bad that we didn't, and,
we will never know.
We really won't know, but this was a great little,
a little adventure into the North Fork or to the Riverhead.
Right. But again, Riverhead really does. Riverhead is part of the East End. I mean, because that really has, while the South Fork never turned into the shopping mecca that a lot of people thought potentially would happen, Riverhead did. And I guess, does that benefit us here? You probably
with a convenience that's 45 to an hour, 5 minutes to an hour away.
So maybe it has, but again, very subjective. But I think we should end this by saying we'll let our listeners of Our Hamptons decide.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the comments. Really, I do.
Me as well. Esperanza, that was a lot of fun. Thank you for taking that trip with me.
Thank you, Irwin, for bringing it.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.